The issue of gun control is debated highly in the United States. Republicans tend to support state regulation of gun control, while Democrats believe it should be a federally controlled issue. In 2008, Washington, D.C. passes legislation barring registration of handguns, requiring licenses on pistols, and mandating all legal firearms be kept unloaded and only for self-defense purposes. This caused private gun owners to argue that this violates their right in the Second Amendment of the right to bear arms. Because D.C. is not a state, those in favor of the legislation argue that the Second Amendment does not apply to it. The laws only regulate guns, not prohibit them, so there was no violation. But the overall question remained as to whether or not the D.C. legislation was constitutional. The court decided that the laws did in fact violate the Second Amendment right to bear arms for legal reasons like self-defense. This ruling took authority of gun control away from the federal government and made it more of an individual state issue.
A similar case was the McDonald v. Chicago case. Years after the D.C. v. Heller case, suits were filed against Chicago challenging gun bans. Because of the previous ruling, private gun owners argued that their Second Amendment right was being violated by the local government. After the case was taken to court, it was ruled that the Second Amendment does apply to the people in the city of Chicago despite Chicago's gun ban laws. This ruling further confused the question as to what level of government has the right to regulate gun use. Another case is the Freeman v. City of Highland Park case. This recent case has yet to be decided and seen by the court, but its central issue sparks further debate on the issue of the authority to regulate guns. Private gun owners sought to invalidate the city ordinance that banned weapons as well as large-capacity magazines. This case identifies gun control and regulation as a local issue.
On the note of gun control being a localized issue arises the fact that gun use varies between states. For instance, the use of guns in a city like Chicago is much different than the use of guns in a state like Wyoming. Wyoming has minimal gun laws and very light regulations on private weapons owners. However, the primary reason for gun purchasing in Wyoming is for recreational hunting. Thus, it is not necessary for the state legislature to enforce heavy gun laws. In crime-ridden cities like Chicago, it is more of a priority for state legislature to enforce strict gun regulations because gun violence is a prevalent and occurring issue. Although the federal government has its hands tied with how much control they have over gun regulation, it's not completely toothless. The Federal Gun Control Act of 1968 created regulations and restrictions on to whom guns and weapons can be sold to. It also established a licensing system for firearms dealers across the country. This act serves as a baseline for gun sales in America, giving the federal government some control over who has the right to own a gun. In 1993, the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act was passed. It required federally licensed arms dealers to perform background checks on all gun purchasers. This further allowed the federal government to control who can buy guns in the nation.
In addition to the Second Amendment, the Commerce Clause is another section of the Constitution that has had significant influence on the issue of gun control. States make the argument that regulating sales of firearms within their borders is the right of the state under the Constitution, because the federal government cannot regulate intrastate commerce. However, the federal government refutes this argument, claiming that it turns to an interstate commerce concern because it takes away the sale of firearms from other states. In conclusion, gun control should fall in the sphere of state legislation. The use of guns and type of private gun owners vary from state to state. Therefore, state lawmakers know how to best fit their regulations to the particular state needs. The federal government cannot create a law that blankets the overall issue of gun control because there is not a single solution to the problem. It is the responsibility of the federal government to create the baseline for gun ownership, but it is the state's right to enforce individual gun laws.